Upcoming support groups and workshops at Authentically Us. Tuesday, April 29th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, Speed Friending. Monday, May the 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern, Messy Middle and Divorce Support Group. Thursday, May the 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern, Catalyst Relationship Recovery Support Group. Thursday, May the 15th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Releasing Shame and Guilt Workshop. Thursday, May the 22nd, 7 p.m. Eastern, Lavender Dating's Writing Your Online Dating Profile. These online events and more available at Authentically Us, a support community for queer identifying women. For more information and to join, visit AnneMarieZanzal.com. Hey, queer friends and allies. Welcome to Season 6 of Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA+ Stories. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Zanzal.
Hello and welcome back, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA+ Stories. And my name is Anne-Marie Zanzal, and I am so excited to welcome Ilu to the show today. Ilu is a 54-year-old lesbian feminist, and at 13 immigrated with her family from Poland. She is passionate about bringing women together and about creating a just world for all. She lives surrounded by rolling hills in upstate New York. Ilu, welcome to the show.
So good to be here, Anna-Marie. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So Ilu reached out to me in Provincetown. We were both in Provincetown for Provincetown's Women's Week back in October. And she reached out to me and we had the opportunity to meet and talk. And at that time, I invited her on the podcast, but she wasn't ready yet. And now she is. So 6 months later, she is ready to be on the podcast and tell her story. So Ilu, tell me your queer story.
Wow, where do I begin?
Wow, that's a hard question, isn't it?
I have spent so much time actually over the last 2 years thinking, where did it really start? Where should I begin my story? And well, there's some vignettes that pop into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when I was 11, growing up in communist Poland, having and my parents were political activists. I would get together with some of my friends, and they were a little older. They were, I think, 2 years older than I. I would get together with my girlfriends in this very Catholic, very religious country to explore kissing, because we knew that kissing boys was a sin, and we definitely did not want to go to hell. So we would get together and experiment with kissing. So it was like a kissing lab, and that was very wonderful and very sweet. So the first,
okay. Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, so it was try it like this. Have you tried it like that? And we would rotate and, I want to try this.
Well, I think that's a really good way to learn how to kiss.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not in touch with any of those girls, but, part of me is wondering, how did they end up? Who did they end up with? Now it's very different in Poland. There's so much more homophobia, even though things are luckily changing with this current political system, but certainly very different than here in the US. So I feel, even with the difficulties going on in the States right now, I feel more privileged. I know things would be harder if I were living in Poland right now.
Can I ask you a question that you may not be able to answer? Communism is typically communist countries do not have a religious belief system. They atheist often. How did the Catholic Church survive in Poland during that time?
Well, what's really interesting, Anna-Marie, the Catholic Church was actually stronger during the communist era because it was a form of resistance. So as a way to protest and I also want to say, there are a lot of good things about communism as a system, providing that it works. If any system is imposed on a society, if it involves dictatorship, then, it's very different. So even though I am saying it's communism, we were basically invaded by Soviet Union and we didn't really have a say about it. And so people would go to church to gather and kind of organize an underground movement. So including my parents, who were not religious at all during that time, they would go to church.
But they use church as a way to organize other people for political resistance.
Right.
So, why did you guys leave Poland?
We left because my parents were involved in wanting to create a better system. Well, they were part of I don't know if you're familiar with the solidarity movement of the 80s, 70s, and 80s. Yes, so they were on the forefront of that in our city. My dad was arrested at some point, and where it was very difficult to leave the country. At that time, you could leave if you were undesirable, then it was very easy to leave. And the only choice that we had was we got to pick a country where we wanted to go to, but like that was it. We didn't know where we would end up. And we ended up in Connecticut. So I know you and I have that in common.
Yeah. And so where did you end up? Did you end up in New Britain, Connecticut?
No, originally in Bridgeport.
Yeah, because there's a huge Polish population in Connecticut. Like people don't know that, but there is, like around New Britain, Ansonia, stuff like that. What was it like for you moving from, from Poland to the United States?
It was so confusing. I mean, anytime you try to prevent someone from going somewhere, then of course this is what you want to do. So and there was very little information coming to Poland about like what is the US really like. So we thought it's like the land of milk and honey, and it was really disappointing initially. I had some really negative first impressions when we ended up on this very hot summer day right downtown Bridgeport, Connecticut, without the language, without, hardly any means. Anyhow, I wanted to go back right away as a 13-year-old, but it was like, there's no way. This was a one-way ticket, and we didn't know when we could go back, if ever. Like my dad never ended up going back.
Well, first of all, I'm very familiar with Bridgeport, Connecticut. And so this was probably what, the 90s you ended up there, or late 80s?
80s, 83.
Okay. So that was the time where Bridgeport was in a really bad downturn. I mean, Bridgeport has done a little bit of coming back over the years, but Bridgeport in the 80s was very dangerous. It was very poor, a lot of marginalized people there. And so I could imagine it must have been a culture shock for you.
It was. And actually, let me tell you, the first day in Bridgeport, this is what happened. Our sponsor found us a place right across from the Polish church. So it's like, okay, we're Polish church, some kind of a community. And the place, we're like, what is this place? Because it actually looked really nice, interesting. They're like, oh, it's a prayer house. Well, it was a funeral home. Oh. We culturally do not have funeral homes in Poland. I mean, I don't know where things are at right now. Strangers culturally do not share a house with a dead person. And they knew that, so they didn't tell us what was really going on. And we were like to live upstairs, and they're like, don't go downstairs. This is, the prayer section of the place. And of course, as a curious 13-year-old, what do? I go exploring.
And
this is how we found out, because, I found a dead person on the first day of being in the US. Yeah.
Did you go running, screaming upstairs? I could imagine. My God, Ilu, I'm so sorry. And your story is so fascinating. Well, we got off track a little bit with your queer story. So I would like to go back to that.
Yes.
So you're like a lot of us, when we come out later in life, we have a lot of recovered memory. So like the memory you have of the kissing the girls is like, it's like we put it in one file and we actually realize later on, maybe that was something more than me practicing kissing girls. Maybe it was because I was attracted to them, and maybe all of you guys were attracted to each other, but you put it under the guise of practicing. And now you're realizing, oh, wait a minute, maybe that was something else. So, what were some other stories you were going to share?
When I was 19, I ended up in Denmark, in Copenhagen, doing 1 year of design school in Denmark. And at that time, Denmark was the first or the second country where gay marriage was actually legal. It was already legal for 2 years. So I'm in an art school, and some of my favorite teachers are like, a woman who has a wife, a man with a husband. And here I am, this sheltered Polish kid, being told that, gay marriage is a sin. This is wrong. And here I am with these wonderful people. It was like really the first time that I had a first-hand experience with people who were gay. And I remember it was kind of a dilemma. I remember like really wanting to figure it out and thinking, well, but it's wrong on one hand, but on the other hand, but they're really good people. And I knew that I had to make a choice. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to follow what my heart tells you, that this is actually fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's so touching for me to recall that, to think about this. And so then guess what? Like just a few months later, I had a crush on a girl.
Mm-hmm.
I actually fell in love with a fellow student, and it really took me by surprise, obviously, and I couldn't wait to tell her. And so when I did tell her, she was really surprised because we weren't even friends. And so she did not reciprocate, and it was hard. It was embarrassing for me. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna tiptoe back into the closet.
Mm-hmm.
It's much safer to be pursued in the traditional way than to pursue. And so that was that, and then I conveniently forgot about that. However, my best friend back in the States, when I came back after that year to the US, my new best friend was a woman who just came out as a lesbian, and I started dating her brother.
So it was like a desire to be close to her. So you dated her brother, or were you actually really attracted to her brother? And.
I have no idea, Anna-Marie, but I definitely really liked her. And looking back, I think now moving forward, what really made it clear for me that I am indeed a lesbian, I want my next relationship to be with a woman. So this is something that happened 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking back, I decided to kind of do like an inventory of my past relationships, like what's going on? How come there were all these men where I don't want to have anything to do with men? Was I really attracted to them or not? So I started writing, and I wrote pages and pages of my past relationships, like why was I involved with these people where clearly it never worked out. I mean, I had some long-term relationships, but in the end, it wasn't satisfying. And then as I wrote all of this out, then I started filling in the blanks of like all the women, like kissing Margaret, or the time that I decided that I was bi and how happy I was about that, even though I still was not pursuing partnerships with women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I somehow felt like living in a patriarchal world, I needed a man by my side for
Right.
whatever reason.
Right.
And I was going to follow that unawarely until I left my last partnership with a man, now I guess almost 4 years ago, and became involved had a really nice friendship with a lesbian, which was pretty common for me since I have quite a few of my closest friends have been lesbians for a long time. But I realized, oh, there's actually more of an attraction, and I am definitely open to pursuing this with her. And then it became very clear to me that this is actually a really wonderful thing.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
When I eventually told my mom, who I thought was a pretty liberal person and had quite a bit of exposure of my friends who were lesbians whom she really liked, but I guess it came a little too close to
To her.
her and her Polish roots, her traditional upbringing. It was a difficult exchange that we had, and we had a rocky relationship over the years anyways. And as a result of that, and some really hurtful things happened, I decided that I need to pause my relationship with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And this was now almost 2 years ago. And this is when I realized that I am a lesbian. I remember leaving her house, feeling incredibly sad. And then everything came together. Like, this is why I have been holding back so much, because here is this reaction. And I just kind of wanted to go with the flow of, things being things, that are supposed to be in a certain way.
So it's, even though with parents, even though we may expect them to be more progressive in their views, I do agree with you. I've had a lot of clients over the years whose moms and dads have been pretty progressive, have had gay or queer friends, even have worked for the queer community in some aspect. But when their own kid came out, they often had a very, very poor reaction. Like, not in my family. I'll accept it in other people's families, but not in my
Right.
family.
Yeah.
So now looking back at it, and now realizing your mom's reaction, when you were growing up as a child, like, did your parents say anything about queer people or gay people in a negative way?
No. Well, I mean, I would imagine some like hidden, not obvious homophobia, but definitely like hidden, like, look, this woman looks like a guy, and kind of like making fun of that.
Well, that's not hidden. That's outright homophobia, right? You know what I mean? Because like when you're making fun of somebody because of how they present with their gender,
Right.
that's homophobia.
Well, no one, they never said, oh, we think it's wrong to be a homosexual. So,
Yeah.
that it
Yeah,
was never this obvious.
but the thing is that's like conditioning, like even though they didn't say, Ilu, you cannot be gay, by their actions and by their words and by the way they spoke about our community, it was very clear to you that you can't be gay. And so it finally, when you did that deep self work, which I love, I think that's a really good suggestion for people. I might even use it with my clients of like writing down about all your past relationships and then filling in the blanks between them might be really helpful for people to think about it. Because a lot of times
Sure.
people when they're coming out really go back and forth whether they're gay. They go back and forth. So I think that's an amazing thing that you did because it put everything in perspective and then you got the confidence to realize that no, I'm not bi. I think I think my label is I'm a lesbian. And your mother's pushback on you made you claim that identity even more.
Yes. Yes. So sometimes, I think, well, it's really my mom who made me a lesbian. Because where before it was like, ooh, I don't know if I even want to use that term, then I really understood the concept of pride. Like, after, she kind of broke my heart in a way.
Hmm.
I realized I am a lesbian, and I am so relieved to be able to be really honest, sincere, and celebrating that.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on the show. So thank you for sharing that point and that's part of that story. And I do like to talk about estrangement and maybe we can have you back on sometime and when you talk about like estrangement with a parent and how do you navigate all that and stuff like that. But I know you're a huge feminist, Lou, and so am I. And you already mentioned the P word, patriarchy. So I would like you to give me your definition of feminism.
Well, when I think of my definition of feminism, I again think of my mother.
Hmm.
And this is because, feminism, the F word, was like a word that no one would use in Poland. And so I didn't obviously grow up with it. However, once my mom got a hold of a copy of a feminist magazine in Polish that I brought from Poland when I was back in the States. And I didn't even think she would read it. And suddenly she tells me, that magazine you left in the kitchen? I read it. I read every article. And I agree with everything that it said.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm a feminist. And it was like, and basically, and for her, it meant like, wow, I'm an equal human being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yes, this is what I would say, not being seen as anything less.
Right. And so I was introduced to feminism by a radical Catholic nun.
Wow.
Yeah. So her name is Sister Miriam Therese Winter. She teaches at Hartford Seminary. So when I was first went to seminary, it was 2006. And I took the class called Women's Leadership. And in the class, she started to talk about feminism. And at that point, like most American women, whether you're a naturalized citizen or a resident alien or just an American woman who's born here, um, I had I didn't have a negative connotation for feminism. I just didn't understand it really. Because I thought it meant about rejecting men. That's what I thought feminism was about. But when I was in that class, I learned that feminism is about equality and equity and diversity. And it is about equality for everyone and equity for everyone and diversity for everyone. It means that, like, just like you said, women are equal to men, and sometimes I think we're more than equal, but we won't go there. But women are equal to men, and it goes across race, religion. So, like, all women are equal to men, equal to men. I mean, we can talk about first wave feminism, second wave, and all those things like that, but it's about equality. But you also mentioned patriarchy. So, what is your definition of patriarchy?
Well, in my own life, patriarchy, as I started examining it more recently, meant throwing myself over and over against this glass wall, invisible wall, and not being able to figure out like what's going on. Where I had my own business, I had my own newspaper printing business for a number of years, and inevitably I had to deal with a lot of men. They would, for example, hardly ever look me into the eyes. Like when I was interviewing printers for the publication, they felt so uncomfortable. And whenever I would bring a man along, like someone, say, who was going to help me carry the packages of the new paper or whatever, they would just start talking to that person, even though like he had no clue what they're talking about. And I also realized, I mean, it's a really deep question, and I know I could unpack it in so many different ways. And this is something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah, I enjoy doing that too.
Yeah, maybe you and I can have a conversation later about that. After I came out, I started noticing what we as women do. Like we dance these little dances around men to like assure them, to make sure everything's fine, to cater to them. And now I can't stand it when I do this. I like usually just walk away when I see this happening. But the thing is, for years, I have been so participating in that. And I think and why I think that was really wired in some belief system that for my survival, and if I had kids, which I don't, but if I had kids, for the survival of my children, I needed to dance this dance to answer to something that is superior to me in order to do okay in life. And
Mhm.
for me now, I would call that patriarchy.
I agree with you. One of the greatest gifts for me has been coming out because my lens on which I look at the world has shifted so tremendously. I see where I have been oppressed, colluded, and influenced by the patriarchy for my whole life.
Yeah.
So, for example, you know, I'm Catholic too. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, so I get it when you talk about all that stuff. Pope John Paul got it, all that stuff like that. Um, and my goal in life, I veered off the path for a while. So when I was like 18 or 19, I dated and was engaged to an African American man. My parents, who were never overly racist, and my mother never was. My father, his racism was unbelievable. And so he never met my boyfriend of 3 years. And so when I when that was all over, that was when I noticed my attraction to women. I was like 21, 22. And like that was the first time I consciously wondered aloud to myself, maybe I'm gay, but I didn't know how to pursue it. Like, how do you meet gay people? Like, how do you make this all happen? I just, I was in Connecticut, very heteronormative state, unless you head to New York City. That didn't even occur to me. And I remember consciously, and I also remember going, I just have gotten my relationship back with my parents. If I decide to go down this route and explore being a lesbian, they're going to think I'm crazy. And they're going to think there's something wrong with me. And I don't want that for my life. I'm just going to fall in line. So I married a man. He fit all the criteria that we are told as women will make us happy. That, he was going to be successful. He was a reasonably good dad. He is a reasonably good dad, had 4 kids, did everything. Like, you were a little bit more of a rebel than me. I mean, I did everything you were supposed to do as a woman, and I wasn't happy. And I'm and that flummoxed me for years. And I typically attract women in my work that have been pretty well educated. And I think the reason why I do is because we're women that we can't figure out what's quite wrong. So we keep getting more and more education or keep switching careers, or, people can be educated and not go to college, but have a lot of life experience. And so, we keep trying to figure out what's wrong. And when I finally accepted my queerness, there was nothing wrong with me. I had just been groomed to fit a system I just don't like is not me or who I am. There are aspects of it, like, back when we were growing up, like, there were very few lesbians that had kids, right? So I really wanted children. I mean, so, now lots of lesbians have children. But when we were young, people who chose to come out and to live their big old gay life often didn't have kids because that just wasn't an option. It was hard to have children as a lesbian. You had to jump through a lot of hoops. Even now you do too. So for me, that's when my lens shifted. When I realized, wait a minute, I bought into a system that really was about oppressing me and my desires. And I'm not talking about my sexual desires either. I'm talking about my desire to create, my desire to lead, my desire to make a change in the world. Those desires. I'm not even talking about being gay. It really F's with women.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel such a mix of sadness as I hear it, and also happiness for you now and
Well,
everything.
I'm with my community. I'll never forget. I don't know if this happened to you, Ilu, but I remember so there's like the mommy circuit, when you have kids, like you become friends with women who are often the mothers of your kids' friends. And I did that. And I remember my very first retreat I ran, I was with a group of other women coming out, and we started talking about how we never really fit in with the mommy circuit. Like we did it and we had some friends from there, but that wasn't really where we felt comfortable. And then when I went to, like, my wife brought me down here to meet her friends, and they're all long time out gay women and stuff like that. Like, I never felt so comfortable and in my skin than when I went to that party like 9, 10 years ago. Like, these are my people. What they are talking about is what I'm interested in. Like, I don't want to talk about your kid or your husband anymore. I want to talk about things that are important. and that was my group of people. Have you had experiences like that?
Yes, I can certainly relate to that. In my case, one of my big transformational moments in my life was when I had to leave my home in California because of the pricing and it was getting sold. And I decided to spend some time in Latin America, specifically in this one place, which really was brought to my attention through my newspaper, Positive News. I was considering republishing this article, which was about this one tribe and their sacred belief in the sacred feminine. And as I was reading this article, I started to cry and I was like, I had a really big body reaction. I didn't know why, but I'm like, okay, one day I would like to go to this place and maybe see if there's something for me to learn. Well, I eventually did go, and that was a journey of really stepping into the world of women. I have received such clear, powerful teachings, and I was eventually able to connect with the women lineage of shamans, which are very much underground at this point, because patriarchy also seeped into these some of these very remote groups as well, but they were still the shamans. And I got this clear message that I really want to do work with women. I want to figure out how to organize women coming together. And so that was a transition from doing my work as an activist that was, for men and women, for anybody, to like really focusing on figuring out how to support women. So more strong women would show up in my life, more queer women would show up, strong individuals who kind of have a better sense of what they really want in their lives. They don't necessarily do the same kind of dances that I have been still doing at that point of wanting to fit in. And so that eventually led me. Okay, I'm like, okay, Ilu, what's the point of why are you really sharing this? It's kind of like a joke, Anna-Marie, because where I wasn't ready to like cross to the other side and say, yes, this is who I am. I'm a lesbian. I was like for years trying to coax all these women, these queer women, to kind of come to my side because I wanted to hang out with them. But I didn't quite know that there was a place for me on the other side too, where I really so enjoyed their company and it just felt so much more at ease, so powerful. And then once I figured out, you know what, I can just cross over and it will be so much easier. And like, some of them are laughing at me like, Ilu, it took you so long and we have been wondering for quite a while.
Like when you're going to figure
Yeah.
this. So I've got a theological question for you. Having grown up in Poland and also knowing the influence of like the Black Madonna and the Virgin Mary and all of those like that, for me, I feel like the church, especially the very, 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 very patriarchal Catholic Church, I feel like there is such a devotion to Mary because people hunger for the divine feminine. Do you agree with me?
Yes. And I love your questions.
Yeah, yeah.
This is so spot on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like in Poland, still there's like churches everywhere, and they're mostly, I think, still open during the day. I mean, I don't know, it's been a while, but when I was there, you could just walk into a church and there's all these altars. And where do you see people in front of which altar? And they're like mostly women. It's always Virgin Mary or the Black Madonna or
Mm-hmm.
some image of sacred feminine. They're not in front of Jesus or any of the other saints. This is where they are. And also, I think there's more churches with the name honoring the Virgin Mary than anyone else in the Catholic tradition
Yeah, I think so
in
too.
Poland.
Because I always felt that that's like I had a particularly affinity to Mary, like when in my time in Catholicism, and even now, as like as a minister in a Protestant denomination, there is an affinity for me for Mary because it is the part of our faith that is so missing. The feminine, the power of birth, the power of giving life, because only women can give life. Men can't do that. Like, I feel that there's such a longing in society that I don't think women are really conscious of it, why they're so like drawn to these female images or these female stories, because I think that women are often clueless to how under the thumb, like, because, like, for example, in this country, any woman who votes for Donald Trump, like, to me that is being like so patriarchal. It is unbelievable, because you are voting against your best interest. As a woman, you are voting against your best interest. What when if somebody came to you and said, this feminism stuff, I don't get it and it really scares me. I don't hate men. Like, what would you say to them?
I would ask them some questions to see if they, through these questions, can arrive at more clarity of, like, I mean, first of all, definitions, like, well, what do you mean by feminism? What is your definition? What does it mean for you as a woman to thrive, to feel safe, to feel empowered? So I think I would have a conversation like that by asking questions and having them create a safe space where they can think and draw some maybe new conclusions for themselves.
Well, I love the first. Okay, so you're a woman who's listening to this podcast and you've never really considered feminism before, or you've thought it was like a bad word. It was just a bad word. We didn't use like lesbian. It's a bad word. We don't use that word. What would be some of the questions you would ask? Like, okay, what is your definition for feminism?
Yes.
What else would I ask? What are some questions you would ask?
I would say, can you think of the one thing that I do in life is I'm very passionate about being a transformational coach. I work with women, and so much of that is about questions.
Right, right.
So I would say, can you think of the first time in your life when you were a little girl, when you learned that you couldn't do something, even though your brother, who maybe was even younger than you, could do that? Just
Mm.
think of that, and then I would say, and how did that feel to you?
That's a good question. I'm going to think about that one. Yeah. Have you ever, I think another question I would ask is, have you ever took on a role or an assignment because you believed that is what you thought you should do as a woman?
Right.
Like being a mother, being a wife, all of those things like that, being a caretaker for your parents, even if your parents haven't been really nice to you. There are so many roles that women take on just because of their gender.
Mhm.
And then I think another one that I would ask, have you ever felt guilty when you put yourself first?
Yes.
Yeah, when you made a decision that might impact others, but it was a necessary decision you made for your life. I would love to hear like one or two examples from you, and I'll give some of my own, of how something in your life that happened where you made a decision that you now realize was really anti-feminist, but you were doing it to either keep the peace or to help somebody out, but you realized that it really wasn't the best for anyone because you were denying yourself something.
So, first thought was thinking about some of these relationships with men that I have been involved with, where it became clear to me that in order to stay in this relationship, I had to really kind of keep myself down. Like, I couldn't really show up more fully with, well, first of all, with my full range of feelings, because
Mm-hmm.
that was so threatening.
Mm-hmm.
And also thinking like, well, if the relationship isn't going well, that means that there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, because it's our job as a woman to make things go well
Right.
in a straight relationship.
Yeah, I really, really resonate with me because I've always been pretty outspoken and I've never Like, I really tried hard to fit into the model role of a wife and a mother, but it was too constraining for me. And so a lot of times, like, it was my fault that I was that way. Like,
Mhm.
there was something wrong with me. I wanted too much. I asked for too much. But I also think about like my choice of ministry. Like, I went into chaplaincy because I knew my husband would never move for me to have a church.
Huh.
I knew that.
Okay,
So,
there you go.
and it's not even that I asked him, I just made that assumption that, he's not going to move. So I'll go into chaplaincy. And so that was a decision I made about my ministry and my career because I knew I would not get the support from my spouse that I needed to do to be able to. And I know a lot of ministers, Elu, that like female ministers, like their husbands won't move. They go and live at the church and do the commuting. And I mean, because their husbands won't, be a part of their ministry in a way, a wife would be expected to be a
Of
part of it.
course, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really valid point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I also like really resonates with me about, so for our listeners, have you made yourself smaller in a relationship, whether it's a work relationship or a personal relationship with your spouse or partner? Have you made yourself smaller for their comfort or that you don't want to outshine them, And I bet a lot of women have done that. They've tamped down on who they are so that their spouse can feel comfortable.
Yeah. And, so in my case, on one hand, it was making myself smaller. On the other hand, it was like giving them a boost.
Mm-hmm.
So they could be more visible and, perceived as more competent.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was definitely a theme in my life.
And now you're partnered now, right?
I'm not
Oh, okay. But
currently.
you have been, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I have noticed now being partnered with a woman versus being partnered with a man, everybody takes responsibility for household chores. Like always asking my ex, I remember being with my ex-husband, and I know this is so minor in the grand scheme of life, but it isn't because it makes, let me explain. I would always ask my ex-husband to like, you don't have to do it. Just supervise the kids because they were teenagers then, just supervise the kids and just have them pick up the kitchen and unload the dishwasher while I'm out working or doing something. Came home, wasn't done.
Hmm.
My wife, like we share responsibility of the house. Like this morning I got up and I was drinking coffee and she was sitting next to me folding the laundry. Like that never would have happened in a billion years in my old relationship. And I always joke everybody should have a wife because it's really, really nice to have a wife. And then I think to myself, I mean, do straight women, are they okay with the dynamic? Like maybe I was so not okay with it because I was always a lesbian and I was like, this is ridiculous that you don't help, you know? Like I wonder that. I wonder if straight women get really, really frustrated with their spouses and stuff and having to carry the big load because just like me, you and I have always had sort of a queer lens. We just didn't realize it. We just didn't realize it.
Yeah. Right.
So what kind of work do you do today? I hear you mentioned your newspaper. I've heard you mentioning your coaching. So tell us what you do.
Well, the newer and very exciting aspect of my work currently is being a transformational coach, where I get to work with women of all types.
Mm-hmm.
And as I like to say, I help women dive deep and make waves.
I love that. That's a great tagline.
Flash.
Yeah, I love that tagline. That's a great one. You got to have it right underneath your coaching thing, helping you dive deep and make waves. I love that. So, what type of transformation are these women going through?
Well, so much of the work brings one back to the childhood. So oftentimes it's dealing with childhood trauma that helps one realize all these places where one was held back, is currently held back, and how it connects to these things that we are not often conscious of. And well, the reason why I dove into being a transformational coach, initially I tapped into a modality called positive intelligence. And because the name of my publication is Positive News, I thought, well, positive intelligence, you cannot go wrong with such a name. And as someone who got to, over the years, review a lot of products and modalities to see if they would be a good fit for the paper, I became pretty skeptical of things that, are like supposed to be great, but don't really work so well. Where positive intelligence really really got my attention. I could see a lot of really good potential with it. And where originally I wanted to get trained as a coach so that I could support activists, change makers, so that not only would I get to write about them, I would offer tools to support people. Then over the years, and that kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with me really surrounding myself with women and really wanting to support women with all the different events that I organize for women, I started supporting women in the coaching practice. And as I have been developing more of my own coaching modality, that went hand in hand with me wanting to heal some of the really deeply rooted deep trauma from my childhood. At one point, I became very committed to heal, to really understand what is going on, to really want to come home to myself much more deeply. And so I have been exploring quite a bit. And then I tapped into the work of psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized that probably one of the biggest secrets in our world of healing is the incredible potential of healing with psychedelics if it is created in a very thoughtful and safe environment. So I have devoted quite a bit of my time to, first of all, healing myself.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And
because you have to heal yourself to be able to heal other people.
yes,
Yeah, the wounded
yes.
healer. Yeah.
And working closely with other women therapists who are also dedicated to creating the most effective healing possibilities for other women. And so, as we have been supporting each other on our journeys of creating a really safe and effective way to heal, it became clear to me that preparation and integration of doing psychedelic healing work are really crucial in creating change for oneself. So that is something that I am very passionate about. And that is a significant chunk of my transformational coaching work. I also work with women where we get to look at love addiction
Mm-hmm.
stuff, estrangement from families or loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I would say at this point, it's probably 60% coaching work and 40% working on positive news.
And so, what does positive news talk about? I mean, is it just the name? Positive. You write about positive. Is it an email or a newsletter that you send out, or is it a print?
It used to be for many years a printed publication. At
Mm-hmm.
this point, it is a virtual publication, and I no longer write articles so much, or we used to create our own. Most of the content was created by our staff, and at this point, we are curating stories. So, bringing stories from the wide world web and then shining a spotlight on those that are already written. And
Mm-hmm.
the idea is promoting stories that support life, support solution-based journalism, where we will talk about hard stuff and issues, and then celebrate those people, communities, and practices that are actually creating a happier and healthier world all around.
How has your work changed since you've come out?
How has my work changed?
Changed since you've come out.
This is when I decided to only work with women
Mm-hmm.
in my coaching practice. And as far as positive news, I'm wanting to be much more conscious of the amount of coverage that I actually give women.
Mm-hmm.
So where it used to be pretty much like half-half do we promote men or women in the publication? Right now, it is generally more women-centered stories and
So
also LGBTQ stories.
yeah, so your writing has changed as you have come out and have had your lens shift.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because women do need the spotlight on them. Sometimes it's funny. So, like, my consciousness has been raised where, like, we'll watch CBS Sunday morning news. We watch we're old. So we watch CBS Sunday morning and they'll do a memorandum, of people who had died that week. 9 times out of 10, when they mention the people that have died, they're white men. Very rarely is it people of color. I'm like, surely someone of color that has done something good for the world has died this week, or a woman. It's typically white men, and I don't think that sometimes even the organizations realize that they do that.
Oh, I
Sometimes you
so
have to
agree.
like look, like you have to actually seek out people like women and men because you know, as queer people and as women, our history has continually been erased.
Yes.
Like, I'll remember being like a history major or a history person when I was like 12 or 13, and I'm like, boy, women really haven't done much in the world. Like, it's always men. Like, I remember consciously like wondering about that. Now I realize it's because all our history is erased. They don't talk about us, and they really don't talk about queer people. I mean, you think women don't get talked about? Like, queer people that have done great contributions to the world get totally erased, or their queerness gets erased.
Right.
They
Yes.
don't, like Emily Dickinson, like, who was very obviously queer, but they
Yes.
erased that part of her, because it makes people uncomfortable. And they want like evidence. And the funny thing is the evidence has to be that they had a sexual love affair with somebody. But being queer is so much more than who we sleep with. That's
Yes.
an important part of it, but it is like that's not just my queerness. My queerness is how I look at the world, and that's my spiritual being, my physical being, my intellectual being, and my emotional being. It's my lens. It's different. And so a lot of times they erase us. So that's why we don't know this history. And so I'm really glad that you're highlighting queer people and women in your newspaper. So
Yes.
let me ask you something. Did you have a coming out song, Ilu?
I did have a coming out song. I thought about that question, and I remember the moment that this song came out onto my Spotify feed, and it was a song in Polish, and this really beautiful voice, and it's like half Polish, half English, and I'm like, this woman, I bet she's a lesbian. I don't know why I thought of that, and then like I did a little bit of research, and I saw like this one video, and I'm like, clearly she is into women. And so being Polish and having like just come out, I would listen to that song over and over.
Well, of course, yeah. My wife, when she was coming out back in the 80s, she would listen to a song and say, this person's a lesbian. And she was always right. Like, she knew people were lesbians before they ever came out just by how they wrote the song and they sang the song and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So I think that's pretty cool. And I'm so glad it was somebody in your native language. And because, you know, hearing things in your native language, you understand all the nuances, you understand all the like the inflection, things that sometimes when we're learners of a second language, sometimes it takes a long time to pick up all that stuff.
Right. And you understand like what it actually takes. For her, she had to move to the UK, like that whole historical weight to it. I wondered like, did she kiss girls? Because, she would go to hell if she kissed boys at
Yeah.
11.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so crazy that they tell us we're going to go to hell if we kiss boys. It's just so crazy. Like that's normal human interaction for people, whether you're heterosexual or homosexual. It is normal interaction for humans to want physical affection. And it's so crazy that make that sinful. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
It is. And for me, sin, my definition of sin is that's what separates us from the divine energy of the
Mhm.
universe. And like loving someone and being in love with somebody will never separate you from that.
I really
So,
like that
yeah,
definition.
yeah. A book or a movie that really changed your perspective on life.
Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody. That book was just so very important because it helped me realize how much love addiction, and really more so in my case validation addiction, had me replay this cycle over and over of being in these relationships that were going nowhere, where I really wanted to be with women.
Have you ever listened to the Love Addicts podcast by any chance?
I'm not sure.
Oh, there's a podcast. I was on it, Love Addicts, and they don't do it anymore.
Okay.
But one of the women on that is a dear friend of mine, and she's like an expert on love addiction. So I was wondering if I could like connect the two of you so she could be in your newspaper. And then my last question for you, Ilu, is how do you describe your life today?
How do I spend my life today?
No, how would you describe your life today?
Describe my life. I'm feeling I am living like the best life that I could imagine. I would have no idea that I would ever get to a place where I am so independent. I have my own home. I have my own I make my own decisions. I have a job that is nourishing me more than ever, and I get to spend my energy much more thoughtfully. I focus my energy on what I really want to focus it on, and I don't focus it on feeding patriarchy, as much as I can. And I work from home. My practice is on the land where I live. So this is where all the work happens, at a place which is called the Playground for Women. And right now it actually started to snow outside here, which is
well, you're upstate New York, so yeah.
Yes, I feel very grateful and connected, enjoying the healthiest version of myself yet, and looking forward to what comes next.
Ilu, where can people find you if they want to talk to you, work with you in transformation, maybe get an article in your newspaper? How do they reach out and find you?
As far as the coaching and all the different things that I'm involved with, you can check me out at Read My.
Okay.
And the name of that business actually came to me in Provincetown.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, how so?
Because I saw a t-shirt in Provincetown that said "Read My Lips," and it had two women kissing each other. And I thought, what a wonderful concept. And so then what I did, my logo for my business is, here I am holding a megaphone. So Read My Lips. On one hand, I have something very important to say, to offer as a woman in this world. And then the other side of that is, women can kiss each other and read each other's lips as much as we want.
And as different lips as well.
Yes. And so there's that website, readmylips.fm. And then for positive news, it's Positive News U.
Okay. So, Ilu, I want to thank you so much today for being on the podcast. It was really wonderful to talk to you and to hear your story. And I'm excited to talk about feminism in the world so they can hear us talk about it, because it is not a dirty word.
It is not. And it has been such a pleasure to connect with you. I feel so alive and invigorated, and I have a bunch of questions for you. So I'm looking forward to continuing this friendship.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA+ stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.